The mirror in Charlotte's room reflected only shadows, where there should have been a 19-year-old girl. She traced her thin fingers across the fog glass, as if she could touch the person who should have been there, outside her window. Eleanor and Beatrice's voices echoed through the Harrison Estate gardens, their crystalline laughter cutting through the morning air of Cedar Springs like music. She had never learned to play. Hey there. Thanks for being here. Leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you think of the story. Let's keep going. Charlotte, William Harrison's harsh voice climbed the stairs. Come here, now. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and descended slowly. Each step seemed to echo the emptiness she carried in her chest. In the main parlor, her father paced back and forth, his heavy boots marking a nervous rhythm on the oak floorboards. Her sisters sat on the green velvet sofa, Eleanor adjusting her golden curls while Beatrice embroidered with graceful movements. Sit. William pointed to the isolated chair near the cold fireplace. Charlotte obeyed in silence, hands clasped in her lap. The navy blue dress hung loose on her frail body, as if it had been made for someone else. I've made a decision about your future. The words came out heavy, final. Gray Eagle will arrive tomorrow at dawn. The name hung in the air like a sentence. Charlotte raised her eyes for the first time, meeting her father's cold gaze. Who is Gray Eagle? William turned to the window, his rigid back facing her. Your new home. The silence stretched like a taut rope ready to snap. Charlotte's fingers gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles white against the dark wood. Eleanor's embroidery needle had stopped mid-stitch, while Beatrice's mouth hung slightly open, a perfect oval of shock. Father, Eleanor's voice wavered. Surely, you don't mean... I mean exactly what I said. William's reflection in the window glass showed a man carved from stone. The arrangement has been made. Gray Eagle is a respected warrior among his people. This alliance will benefit both our families. Charlotte felt the words hit her like physical blows. Asterisk alliance, arrangement, benefit. Asterisk never once had he said her name with warmth. Never once mentioned what she might want or need. But she's my sister, Beatrice whispered, her usual confidence crumbling. She belongs here, with us. William finally turned, his weathered face showing neither regret nor compassion. Charlotte has been struggling. Perhaps a different environment will provide what we cannot. Asterisk what we cannot. Asterisk the words echoed in Charlotte's mind. She had become a problem to be solved, a burden to be shifted elsewhere. Her throat tightened, but no sound emerged. The familiar weight of inadequacy settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. I won't go. The words slipped out before she could stop them, barely audible but cutting through the tension like a blade. William's gray eyes fixed on her with the intensity of a hawk spotting prey. You will. The decision is made. You can't just sell me. Charlotte's voice grew stronger, though her hands trembled. I'm not cattle or property to be traded. You are my daughter, and you will do as I say. His tone brooked no argument. Gray Eagle's tribe controls the mountain passes. This union secures safe passage for our goods and protection for Cedar Springs. Your personal feelings are irrelevant. Eleanor rose from the sofa, her pale blue dress rustling. Father, there must be another way. Charlotte could stay here, help with the household. Look at her, Eleanor. William gestured dismissively toward Charlotte. She barely eats, barely speaks, barely exists. What use is she to anyone in this state? The words struck Charlotte like physical blows. She had heard whispers, seen the worried glances, felt the weight of disappointment in every room she entered. But hearing it spoken so plainly, so coldly, shattered something inside her chest. Beatrice stood as well, moving closer to Charlotte's chair. She's ill, Father. She needs care, not abandonment. She needs purpose. William moved to his desk, pulling out a leather-bound ledger. Gray Eagle understands her condition. He has agreed to the arrangement regardless. Asterisk regardless. Asterisk as if her struggles were merely an inconvenience to be overlooked. Charlotte felt hollow, like a shell that might crumble at the slightest touch. The man she had called father for 19 years was discussing her as if she were damaged goods being sold at a discount when Charlotte's voice came out as a whisper. "Dawn tomorrow. You'll have tonight to prepare." Eleanor gasped. "Tomorrow? But that's no time at all, time enough." William closed the ledger with a sharp snap. "Pack light. Your new life won't require the luxuries you've known here." Charlotte stood slowly, her legs unsteady. The room seemed to tilt around her, the familiar furniture and family portraits becoming strange and distant. This house, which had never truly felt like home, was about to become a memory. May I have a moment alone?" she asked. "You have until sunrise." William replied without looking up from his papers. "I suggest you use it wisely." As Charlotte walked toward the door, she heard Beatrice's soft sob and Eleanor's sharp intake of breath. But she didn't turn back. She climbed the stairs to her room, each step taking her further from the only life she had ever known, and closer to an uncertain future with a stranger named Grey Eagle. The broken mirror still reflected only shadows, but now those shadows seemed to whisper of change, of endings and beginnings she could never have imagined. Charlotte sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small leather satchel that would hold her entire life. What did one pack when leaving everything behind? Her fingers traced the worn binding of her mother's journal, the only connection she had to the woman who had died bringing her into this world. The door creaked open, and Eleanor slipped inside, carrying a tray of tea and biscuits. Her usually perfect hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "You need to eat something," Eleanor whispered, setting the tray on the nightstand. "I'm not hungry." The familiar response came automatically. "Charlotte, please." Eleanor sat beside her, the mattress dipping slightly. "You'll need your strength for whatever comes next." They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them. Charlotte had always felt like a ghost haunting the edges of her sisters' vibrant lives, but now she realized how much their presence had anchored her to this world. "Do you remember?" Eleanor began softly. "When we were children, and you used to tell us stories about the mountains, about brave women who lived free among the trees and streams." Charlotte's throat tightened. She had forgotten those stories, those moments when her imagination had soared beyond the confines of Cedar Springs. That was different. Those were just fantasies, were they? Eleanor took her hand, so thin it felt like holding bird bones. "Maybe this isn't an ending, Charlotte. Maybe it's the beginning of one of your stories." Before Charlotte could respond, Beatrice appeared in the doorway, her arms full of warm clothing and a thick woolen cloak. "I brought things for the journey," she said, her voice struggling to stay steady. "The mountains will be cold." The three sisters spent the next hour in quiet preparation. Eleanor brushed Charlotte's dark hair until it shone, braiding it with gentle fingers. Beatrice packed practical items: warm stockings, a sewing kit, a small bottle of lavender oil that had belonged to their mother. "I wish I could go with you," Beatrice whispered as she folded a nightgown into the satchel. "No, you don't," Charlotte replied, surprising herself with a sad smile. "You belong here." In the sunlight, as midnight approached, Eleanor produced a small wooden box from behind her back. This was Mother's. Father never knew she had it. Inside, nestled in faded silk, lay a delicate silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Charlotte's breath caught. She had never seen it before, but somehow it felt familiar, as if it had been waiting for her. She wore it the day she married. "Father," Eleanor explained, fastening the chain around Charlotte's neck. "But I think it meant something else to her, something secret." The pendant felt warm against Charlotte's skin, and for a moment, she could almost imagine her mother's presence in the room, a woman she had never known, but whose absence had shaped every day of her life. A soft knock interrupted their moment. The door opened to reveal Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper who had tended to Charlotte through countless sleepless nights and refused meals. "Miss Charlotte," the older woman said, her voice thick with emotion, "I've brought you something for the journey." She held out a small cloth bundle. Inside were dried herbs, a jar of honey, and a loaf of fresh bread. Simple gifts, but they carried the weight of years of patient care. Mrs. Hartwell, hush now, child. The housekeeper's weathered hands cupped Charlotte's face. You're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As the first hint of gray began to touch the horizon, Charlotte found herself standing at her bedroom window, looking out at the world she was about to leave behind. The familiar gardens, the distant mountains that had always seemed like barriers, the small town of Cedar Springs sleeping peacefully in the valley below. Her sisters flanked her, their presence a bittersweet comfort. They had shared this house, this life, but Charlotte had always been the outsider looking in. Now she was about to step into a world where she would be the only one of her kind. I'm scared, she admitted, the words barely audible. That's okay, Eleanor whispered, squeezing her hand. Being scared means you're alive, and being alive means there's hope, Beatrice added, her voice breaking slightly in the distance. Charlotte could hear the sound of horses approaching. Her heart began to race, each hoofbeat bringing her closer to an uncertain future. She pressed her hand to the pendant at her throat, drawing what comfort she could from this tangible link to the mother she had never known. The sound grew closer, and Charlotte knew that Grey Eagle had arrived. Whatever happened next would change everything. But for the first time in her life, she wondered if change might not be the enemy she had always believed it to be. The sound of hoofbeats on gravel echoed through the morning mist like thunder from another world. Charlotte pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched three riders emerge from the gray dawn. The man in the center sat tall and straight on a black horse, his long dark hair flowing free in the morning wind. He's here, Eleanor whispered, her hand finding Charlotte's shoulder. William's voice boomed from downstairs, formal and businesslike. Grey Eagle, welcome to the Harrison estate. Charlotte's legs felt weak as she descended the stairs one final time, her leather satchel clutched against her chest like armor. In the main hall, her father stood beside a man unlike anyone she had ever seen. Grey Eagle was tall and broad-shouldered, his bronze skin weathered by sun and wind. He wore simple leather clothing adorned with intricate beadwork, and his dark eyes held a depth that seemed to see everything at once. This is Charlotte, William announced, his tone suggesting she was merely another piece of property being transferred. Grey Eagle's gaze found hers, and Charlotte felt something shift inside her chest. His eyes weren't cold or calculating like her father's. They were serious, yes, but there was something else, their patience, perhaps, or understanding. He didn't speak immediately, and the silence stretched between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. You are ready? His voice was low and measured, each word carefully chosen. English was clearly not his first language, but he spoke it with quiet dignity. Charlotte nodded, not trusting her voice. Behind Grey Eagle stood other men, their faces neutral but watchful. One was older with gray threading through his black hair, the other younger with keen eyes that missed nothing. The journey will be long, Grey Eagle continued, his attention focused entirely on Charlotte rather than her father. We will stop when you need rest. The simple consideration in his words surprised her. She had expected demands, orders, perhaps even cruelty. Instead, he seemed to be asking rather than commanding. William stepped forward, clearly eager to conclude the transaction. The terms we discussed are complete. Grey Eagle's interruption was quiet but firm. He reached into a leather pouch and withdrew a small object, placing it in William's palm. Charlotte caught a glimpse of carved stone and silver before her father closed his fist around it. Charlotte, Grey Eagle turned back to her, and she noticed how he said her name not with ownership, but with something that almost resembled respect. Your belongings. She held up her single satchel, and something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. He glanced around the grand hall, taking in the expensive furniture and elaborate decorations, then back to her meager possessions. This is all. It's enough. Charlotte managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor and Beatrice appeared at the top of the stairs, their faces pale with grief and worry. Grey Eagle followed Charlotte's gaze upward and seemed to understand the weight of what she was leaving behind. "You may say goodbye," he said simply. Her sisters rushed down, enveloping her in tearful embraces. Eleanor pressed a small wrapped bundle into her hands, more food for the journey, while Beatrice whispered fierce words of love and encouragement in her ear. "Be strong," Eleanor whispered. "Remember the stories." When Charlotte finally pulled away, Grey Eagle was waiting by the door, patient as stone. He offered her his arm, a gesture of courtesy that seemed natural to him but surprised her with its gentleness. Outside, a gentle mare stood ready, saddled with soft furs and blankets. Grey Eagle helped Charlotte mount, his touch brief and respectful. As she settled into the saddle, she looked back at the house one final time, seeing her sisters framed in the doorway like figures in a painting she would carry forever. "We go," Grey Eagle said quietly, and the small procession began to move away from everything Charlotte had ever known. The first hours passed in silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of hooves on dirt roads. Charlotte gripped her reins with white knuckles, her body rigid with tension as Cedar Springs faded into the distance behind them. The familiar rolling hills gave way to rougher terrain, and with each mile, she felt herself moving further from everything she had ever known. Grey Eagle rode slightly ahead, his posture relaxed and alert. Occasionally, he would glance back at her, but he didn't speak. The two men with him whom she had learned were called Standing Bear and Swift Arrow flanked their small group like silent guardians. When the sun reached its peak, Grey Eagle raised his hand, signaling a stop beside a clear stream. Charlotte's legs trembled as she dismounted, her body unaccustomed to riding for so long. She stood uncertainly by her horse, watching as the men efficiently began preparing a simple meal. "Sit," Grey Eagle gestured to a fallen log near the water's edge. "Rest." Charlotte obeyed, grateful to be off the horse. Her back ached, and the constant motion had left her feeling queasy. The thought of food made her stomach clench with familiar anxiety, but she tried to push the feeling away. Standing Bear, the older man with graying hair, approached with a piece of dried meat and what looked like bread made from corn. He offered it to her with a slight nod, his weathered face kind but reserved. "Thank you," Charlotte whispered, accepting the food though her appetite had vanished entirely. Grey Eagle settled beside her on the log, maintaining a respectful distance. He ate slowly, methodically, his eyes scanning the surrounding forest with practiced ease. After several minutes of silence, he spoke. "Your father said you do not eat well." The directness of his statement caught Charlotte off guard. Heat rose in her cheeks, and she stared down at the untouched food in her hands. "It's complicated. Many things are complicated." Grey Eagle's voice held no judgment, only quiet observation. "But the body needs strength for what comes ahead." Charlotte forced herself to take a small bite of the bread. It was different from what she was used to, earthier, with a slightly sweet taste that wasn't unpleasant. To her surprise, her stomach didn't immediately rebel. "What comes ahead?" she asked, surprising herself by engaging in conversation. "Mountains, rivers, my people." Grey Eagle turned to look at her fully for the first time since they'd begun riding. A different way of living. Different how? He was quiet for a long moment, seeming to consider his words carefully. "Your father's house is full of things, beautiful things, expensive things, but they do not make life." Charlotte followed his gaze to where Swift Arrow was refilling their water containers from the stream. The younger man moved with fluid grace, completely at ease in the wilderness around them. "What makes life, then?" she asked, genuinely curious despite her fear. "Purpose, connection to the earth, to each other." Grey Eagle picked up a smooth stone from the stream bank, turning it over in his large hands. "Your people build walls to keep the world out. My people build circles to bring the world in." The concept was so foreign to Charlotte's experience that she struggled to understand it. Her entire life had been about walls. The walls of her room where she hid for meals, the walls of expectations she could never meet, the walls of silence that separated her from her family. "I don't understand," she admitted. "You will." There was something in his tone that wasn't quite promise, but wasn't dismissal either. "Or you will not, but you will have the chance to see." As they prepared to continue their journey, Gray Eagle helped Charlotte back onto her horse. This time, his hands lingered briefly on her waist, steadying her, and she caught a glimpse of something in his dark eyes, not pity, but perhaps recognition of her struggle. "The path grows steeper now," he warned. "If you need to stop, you say. So there is no shame in needing rest." The simple acceptance in his words struck her more deeply than any criticism ever had. All her life, needing rest, needing help, needing anything had been seen as weakness. Here was a man telling her that her needs mattered, that acknowledging them was not shameful. As they rode deeper into the wilderness, Charlotte found herself stealing glances at Gray Eagle. He was nothing like the men she had known, not cruel, like her father, not dismissive like the suitors who had shown brief interest before discovering her condition. He was something else entirely, something she had no name for. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy above them, creating patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. For the first time in years, Charlotte felt something other than fear or emptiness. She couldn't name it yet, but it felt suspiciously like hope. 3 days into their journey, Charlotte began to understand what Gray Eagle meant about walls and circles. The forest around them was alive in ways she had never noticed. From the windows of the Harrison estate, birds called to each other across the canopy. Small animals rustled through the underbrush, and the very air seemed to pulse with an energy she had never felt before. Her body was adapting to the rhythm of travel, though slowly. Each morning brought new aches, but also a strange sense of accomplishment. She was doing something she had never imagined possible, surviving outside the protected confines of Cedar Springs. On the 4th evening, they made camp beside a small lake that reflected the sky like polished silver. Charlotte watched as Standing Bear built a fire with practiced efficiency while Swift Arrow disappeared into the forest, returning with fresh fish and wild greens she didn't recognize. "You know the names of these plants?" Gray Eagle asked, settling beside her as she examined the unfamiliar leaves Swift Arrow had gathered. Charlotte shook her head. "In Cedar Springs, food comes from the kitchen. I never thought about where it comes from before that. Everything has a purpose, a place in the circle." Gray Eagle picked up one of the green leaves, crushing it gently between his fingers. The scent that rose was sharp and clean. "This one helps with stomach pain. This one," he indicated another plant, "gives strength when the body is weak." The way he spoke of the plants reminded Charlotte of how Mrs. Hartwell had tended her herb garden, but with a deeper reverence, as if each leaf was a gift rather than simply a tool. "My grandmother knew these things," Charlotte said quietly, surprising herself with the admission. "Before she died, she used to make teas for me when I couldn't sleep." It was the first time she had voluntarily shared something personal, and Gray Eagle received it with the same quiet attention he gave everything else. "Grandmothers are keepers of wisdom," he said simply. "Mine taught me that healing comes not just from plants, but from understanding why the body fights itself." Charlotte's breath caught. The observation cut too close to the truth she carried, the daily battle with her own reflection, her own hunger, her own worth. That night, as the fire crackled between them and the others slept, Charlotte found herself studying Gray Eagle's profile in the flickering light. His face was strong, marked by years of sun and wind, but there was something peaceful about his expression that she envied. "Why did you agree to this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To take me?" Gray Eagle was quiet for so long that Charlotte thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, as if he was choosing each one with care. "Your father spoke of alliance, of trade agreements." He poked at the fire with a long stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "But when I saw you in his house, I understood the real reason he wanted you gone." Charlotte's chest tightened. Because I'm broken. No. The firmness in his voice startled her. Because you are different, and he does not know what to do with different. She stared at him, searching his face for signs of pity or false kindness, but found neither. His expression was serious, thoughtful. My people have a saying, he continued. The tree that grows in the shadow of the mountain learns to find light in places others cannot see. Perhaps you have been looking for light in the wrong places. The metaphor washed over Charlotte like cool water. She had spent 19 years trying to fit into the sunlight her sisters inhabited so naturally, never considering that there might be other kinds of illumination. What if I can't learn? She whispered, voicing the fear that had lived in her heart since childhood. What if I'm too damaged? Gray Eagle turned to face her fully, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Damaged things can be mended. But first, you must stop believing you are damaged instead of a person who has been hurt. The distinction struck her like lightning. She had spent so long thinking of herself as fundamentally flawed that she had never considered she might simply be wounded, and wounds, unlike flaws, could heal. As if sensing the weight of his words, Gray Eagle stood and moved to check on the horses, leaving Charlotte alone with her thoughts. She touched the silver pendant at her throat, thinking of the mother she had never known. Had she, too, felt like damaged goods in William Harrison's house? Had she, too, searched for light in shadows? The fire burned lower, and Charlotte pulled her blanket closer around her shoulders. Tomorrow they would reach the foothills of the mountains. Gray Eagle had said, tomorrow, she would begin to see what lay beyond the world she had always known. For the first time in her life, the unknown didn't feel quite so terrifying. The village appeared gradually, emerging from the forest like something from a dream. Charlotte had expected the dramatic arrival she had read about in books, a sudden clearing revealing rows of teepees or wooden structures. Instead, Gray Eagle's people lived in harmony with the landscape. Their homes nestled between ancient trees and flowing streams as if they had grown there naturally. The first to notice their approach was a young boy who had been gathering berries. Near the forest edge, he dropped his basket and ran ahead, calling out in a language Charlotte didn't understand, but whose joy was unmistakable. Soon, people began emerging from the dwellings, men, women, children, and elders all converging to welcome the returning travelers. Charlotte's hands trembled on her reins as dozens of curious eyes turned toward her. She had never felt so visible, so obviously out of place. Her pale skin and dark traveling dress marked her as foreign in a way that went beyond mere appearance. These people moved with the same fluid grace she had observed in Gray Eagle, connected to their surroundings in a way she had never experienced. An elderly woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of generations stepped forward. She spoke rapidly to Gray Eagle in their native tone, gesturing towards Charlotte with what appeared to be concern rather than hostility. This is Grandmother Willow, Gray Eagle said. Turning to Charlotte, she asked if you are well enough to walk or if you need to rest before meeting the others. The consideration surprised Charlotte. She had expected questioning, perhaps suspicion, but not immediate concern for her welfare. I can walk, she managed, though her legs felt like water. Gray Eagle helped her dismount, and Charlotte found herself standing in the center of what felt like a gentle whirlwind of activity. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' skirts, their dark eyes wide with curiosity. The adults maintained respectful distance, but she could feel their assessment, not cruel or judgmental, but thorough. They wonder about your health, Gray Eagle explained quietly as Grandmother Willow approached with a wooden cup, filled with what smelled like herbal tea. Word traveled that you struggle to nourish yourself. Heat flooded Charlotte's cheeks. Her condition, which had been a shameful secret in Cedar Springs, was apparently common knowledge here. She wanted to disappear, to hide behind Gray Eagle's broad shoulders. But Grandmother Willow was already pressing the warm cup into her hands. The elderly woman spoke softly, her voice musical despite the foreign words. Gray Eagle translated, she says the body forgets how to trust. When the heart has been hurt too often, the tea will help both remember. Charlotte sipped the brew cautiously. It was unlike anything she had tasted, earthy and sweet, with undertones of something that reminded her of her grandmother's garden. To her amazement, her stomach, which usually rejected anything offered by strangers, accepted it readily. Grey Eagle led her through the village, past dwellings that were more beautiful than she had imagined. Some were traditional structures she recognized from illustrations, but others were built of stone and wood, incorporating the natural features of the landscape. Gardens flourished everywhere, not the formal, controlled plots of Cedar Springs, but organic spaces where food plants grew alongside flowering vines and medicinal herbs. The houses are so alive, Charlotte observed, stopping before a dwelling where morning glories climbed the walls, and a small stream had been diverted to flow past the entrance. Buildings should serve life, not contain it, Grey Eagle replied. Come, I will show you where you will stay. He led her to a smaller structure set slightly apart from the main cluster of homes. It was built into a natural depression in the earth, with windows that faced east toward the mountains. Inside, Charlotte was surprised by the warmth and comfort. Soft furs on the floor, baskets of woven grass, and a small fireplace that filled the space with gentle light. This was my sister's home, Grey Eagle explained, his voice carrying a note of sadness. She walked the spirit path to winters ago. Since then, it has waited for someone who needed sanctuary. Charlotte set down her meager belongings, looking around at the space that was to become her new home. It was smaller than her room in Cedar Springs, but somehow it felt larger, as if the walls themselves breathed with possibility. Grey Eagle, she began, then stopped, unsure how to express what she was feeling. He waited patiently, as he always did. Why are they being so kind to me? They don't know me. For all they know, I could be. She gestured helplessly at herself. You could be what? Weak, useless, a burden? Grey Eagle studied her for a long moment. You have traveled 7 days through wilderness you had never seen. You have eaten when your body told you not to. You have shown courtesy to people whose language you do not speak. What about this seems weak? Charlotte had no answer for that. She had been so focused on her failures, her struggles, that she hadn't considered the simple fact of her survival as an accomplishment. Rest now, Grey Eagle said, moving toward the door. Tomorrow, you begin to learn what strength you already possess. Charlotte woke to unfamiliar sounds, birds she couldn't name, the gentle murmur of the stream outside her window, and voices speaking in the musical language of Grey Eagle's people. For a moment, she lay still, letting the strangeness wash over her. No bells calling servants, no clip-clop of horses on cobblestones. Number Eleanor's laughter echoing through grand hallways. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Charlotte, Grey Eagle's voice was quiet, respectful. May I enter? She pulled her blanket closer and sat up. Yes. He stepped inside carrying a wooden tray with what appeared to be breakfast. Flatbread, berries, and a steaming cup of the same herbal tea Grandmother Willow had given her the night before. You slept? He asked, setting the tray on a low table near the window. Charlotte nodded. Though she had actually slept better than she had in months. The absence of familiar anxieties, what Eleanor might say about her appearance, what her father might demand of her, had allowed a peace she hadn't realized she was missing. Today, if you are willing, Grandmother Willow would like to speak with you. She knows much about. Grey Eagle paused, seeming to search for the right words. About helping the body remember how to trust. The prospect of discussing her struggles with a stranger, even one as kind as Grandmother Willow, made Charlotte's stomach clench. What would she want to know? Whatever you choose to tell her, no more, no less. Grey Eagle moved to the window, looking out at the village where people were beginning their daily activities. In our way, healing begins with understanding the whole person, not just the sickness. Charlotte picked at the flatbread, managing a small bite. It was warm and nutty, unlike the refined breads of her father's table. In Cedar Springs, the doctors said I was being willful, that I could eat if I truly wanted to. And do you truly want to? The question was so direct, so without judgment, that Charlotte found herself considering it seriously for the first time. I don't know. Sometimes I'm hungry, but when I try to eat, it feels wrong. Like I don't deserve it. Gray Eagle turned from the window, his dark eyes thoughtful. Why would you not deserve to live? Because I'm not. Charlotte struggled to find words for feelings she had never spoken aloud. I'm not like Eleanor and Beatrice. I'm not beautiful or graceful or useful. Useful to whom? The question stopped her short. She had never considered that usefulness might be measured differently in different places. An hour later, Charlotte found herself sitting across from Grandmother Willow in a garden behind the elder's home. The old woman's hands moved constantly as they spoke, picking herbs, sorting seeds, weaving small baskets from dried grass. It was as if she couldn't sit still without creating something. Gray Eagle tells me you have forgotten how to trust your body, Grandmother Willow said, speaking English with a careful precision that suggested years of practice. But I think perhaps your body has forgotten how to trust the world. Charlotte watched the elder's weathered fingers work with the grass, creating intricate patterns that seemed to emerge naturally from her movements. I don't understand. When a young deer is chased by wolves too many times, it learns to run from shadows. Even when the wolves are gone, even when the shadow is only a leaf moving in the wind, it runs. Grandmother Willow's hands paused. Your body learned to run from nourishment because nourishment came with conditions. Eat this, and you will be acceptable. Refuse this, and you will be criticized. So your body chose to run. The metaphor struck Charlotte with unexpected force. She thought of countless meals where her father had commented on her appearance, where well-meaning relatives had praised Eleanor for a healthy appetite, while regarding Charlotte with concern and disappointment. How do I stop running? Grandmother Willow smiled, the expression transforming her lined face. Slowly, patiently, with the understanding that your body was trying to protect you, not harm you. She reached into a basket beside her and withdrew a small pouch of seeds. These are sunflower seeds. Each one contains everything needed to become a tall, strong plant. But if you plant them in poor soil, or give them to little water, or too much criticism, she chuckled, they will not grow as they should. Charlotte accepted the pouch, feeling the small weight of potential in her palm. You have been trying to grow in poor soil. The elder continued, here, the soil is different. Here, you are valued not for what you produce, but for what you are, a person, a spirit having a human experience, worthy of nourishment simply because you exist. That evening, Charlotte sat outside her new home as the sun set behind the mountains. The seeds lay in her palm, each one a tiny promise. For the first time in years, she felt something that might have been hunger, not the painful emptiness she was used to, but a genuine desire for sustenance. When Gray Eagle appeared with her evening meal, she managed to eat half of what he brought. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Charlotte's arrival, and she had begun to find a tentative rhythm in her new life. She helped Grandmother Willow tend her medicinal garden, learning to distinguish between healing herbs and common weeds. Her hands, once soft and pale from a life of leisure, were beginning to show small calluses from working with earth and plants. More importantly, she was eating not easily, not without struggle, but consistently. It was during her 3rd week that she encountered Red Bear. Charlotte was gathering water from the stream when she noticed a group of young warriors returning from what appeared to be a hunting expedition. Their leader was a man near Gray Eagle's age, with broad shoulders and a face marked by ritual scars that spoke of courage in battle. His eyes, when they found hers, held none of the quiet acceptance she had grown accustomed to from the other villagers. So this is the white woman Gray Eagle traded for, Red Bear said in English, his accent thick but his words deliberately clear. He wanted her to understand. Charlotte straightened, clutching her water container. The other warriors stood behind their leader, their expressions neutral but watchful. She had known this moment would come, the challenge, the test of whether she truly belonged or was merely being tolerated. "I am Charlotte," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Charlotte." Red Bear spoke her name as if tasting something unpleasant. A white name for a white woman who knows nothing of our ways. "I am learning," Charlotte replied, though her heart was racing. "Learning." Red Bear stepped closer, and Charlotte caught the scent of wood smoke and leather that clung to him. "You learn to pick plants from Grandmother Willow. You learn to eat food prepared by others. But what do you give back? What value do you bring to our people?" The question struck in her deepest fears. It was her father's voice all over again, demanding justification for her existence, proof of her worth. But something had changed in these weeks among gray eagles. People, the constant fear that had lived in her chest, had begun to loosen its grip. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I'm willing to find out." Red Bear's eyes narrowed. Pretty words. But when winter comes and food grows scarce, will pretty words feed the children? When raiders threaten our village, will you stand and fight, or hide behind Gray Eagle's protection? Before Charlotte could respond, a clear voice cut through the tension. "Red Bear." Gray Eagle emerged from the forest path, carrying the results of his own hunting to rabbits and several fish. His expression was calm, but Charlotte caught the steel beneath his quiet demeanor. "You question my guest." Gray Eagle's English was careful, formal a tone Charlotte had not heard from him before. "I question the wisdom of bringing an outsider into our village," Red Bear replied, switching to their native language. Charlotte couldn't understand the words, but the challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Gray Eagle responded in the same language, his tone level but firm. The conversation continued for several minutes, with other villagers beginning to gather. Charlotte stood frozen, understanding that her fate was being debated but unable to participate in her own. Defensive finally, Red Bear turned back to her. "Gray Eagle says you have shown courage in coming here, that you seek to heal yourself and find your place among us." His skepticism was evident. "I say courage is easy. When you have nothing left to lose, true courage comes when you have something worth protecting." "You're right," Charlotte said, the words surprising everyone, including herself. "I did come here with nothing to lose, but that doesn't make the journey less frightening or the changes less difficult." Red Bear studied her with new attention. "You want to know what I can give to your people?" Charlotte continued, finding strength in honesty. "I don't know yet. In my father's house, I was taught that my value lay in being quiet, obedient, and ornamental. Those skills aren't useful here, but I can learn new ones. I can work. I can contribute. And if you cannot, if you remain weak, dependent." Charlotte thought of Grandmother Willow's words about deserving nourishment simply for existing. "Then I suppose your people will decide whether a person's worth is measured only by what they produce, or whether there's value in simply being human." The silence that followed her words stretched taut as a bowstring. Red Bear's expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes had shifted. "We will see," he said finally. "But know this, being Gray Eagle's woman will not protect you from proving yourself. Here, respect is earned, not given." As the group dispersed, Gray Eagle approached Charlotte. "You spoke well," he said quietly. "Did I?" Charlotte's hands were shaking now that the confrontation was over. "I felt like I was drowning. Sometimes learning to swim means allowing yourself to sink first, to understand where the bottom is." Gray Eagle helped her with the water container. "Red Bear is not cruel. He protects what he loves, but his protection sometimes blinds him to new possibilities. And what if he's right? What if I can't contribute anything meaningful?" Gray Eagle stopped walking and turned to face her. "You are already contributing." Grandmother Willow smiles. "More since you began helping her. The children watch you with curiosity instead of fear. And he paused, as if weighing his words carefully. "I sleep better knowing you are safe." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. But for Charlotte, it was enough to know that the bridge existed at all. Charlotte's determination to prove herself led her to seek out tasks that challenged her beyond Grandmother Willow's gentle garden work. She approached Swift Arrow about learning to fish, asked the village women to teach her their weaving techniques, and even attempted to help with food preparation. Though her hands still trembled when handling large quantities of meat. It was during one of these earnest attempts at contribution that she made a discovery that would change everything. She was helping Morningstar, one of the younger women, prepare hides for winter clothing when the woman began singing softly in their native language. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, rising and falling like wind through pine trees. Charlotte found herself humming along, unconsciously, the tune seeming familiar, though she was certain she had never heard it before. Morningstar stopped mid-verse, staring at Charlotte with wide eyes. "Where did you learn that song?" I don't know. I was just humming along." Charlotte felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm sorry if I offended, no offense," Morningstar said quickly. "But that is an old song, a sacred one. Only certain families know it." She called out in their language, and several other women approached, their expressions curious but concerned. Gray Eagle appeared within minutes, drawn by the commotion. After a rapid exchange in their native tongue, he turned to Charlotte with an expression she couldn't read. "They say you sang the song of the silver moon," he said carefully. "It is not taught to outsiders." Charlotte's hand instinctively went to the pendant at her throat, her mother's pendant, shaped like a crescent moon. "I don't understand. I've never heard it before, but it felt familiar." Grandmother Willow pushed through the gathered crowd, her weathered face grave. She spoke rapidly to Gray Eagle, gesturing toward Charlotte with increasing urgency. She asked to see your mother's pendant. Gray Eagle translated. With trembling fingers, Charlotte lifted the silver crescent from beneath her dress. The moment Grandmother Willow saw it, she gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears began streaming down her weathered cheeks as she spoke in a voice thick with emotion. "She says," Gray Eagle's voice was barely above a whisper, "she says this belonged to Iron Wolf's daughter. Iron Wolf's daughter who was taken by the white settlers 25 years ago." The world seemed to tilt around Charlotte. "That's impossible. My mother was Margaret Harrison. She died in childbirth. Was she?" Gray Eagle's dark eyes searched her face with new intensity. "Or was that the story you were told, Grandmother?" Willow approached slowly, as if Charlotte might flee like a startled deer. She cupped Charlotte's face in her hands, studying her features with the careful attention of someone comparing a face to a cherished memory. "The eyes," the elder whispered in English. "Iron Wolf's eyes. And the chin, stubborn like his daughter's." She turned to the crowd, speaking rapidly in their language. Charlotte caught one word repeated several times. "Ayana. Ayana," Gray Eagle said softly. Her name was Ayana, she who blooms forever. Charlotte felt as if she were drowning in revelation. "You're saying my mother that she was one of your people, not just one of our people," Grandmother Willow said, her voice reverent. "Iron Wolf's daughter. Iron Wolf was my brother. If you are Ayana's child," she trailed off. "But the implication hung in the air like smoke. That would make you my great-niece." The elder finished. "Blood of our blood." The gathered crowd erupted, an excited conversation. But Charlotte heard only silence. Every foundation of her identity was crumbling. William Harrison wasn't her father. The woman she had imagined as her refined, tragic mother had been a Native American woman who had somehow ended up in Cedar Springs. Everything she thought she knew about herself was a lie. "I need air," she gasped, pushing through the crowd toward the forest. But with each step, the pendant at her throat seemed to grow warmer, as if it were coming alive against her skin. Behind her, she could hear Gray Eagle following. But she didn't stop until she reached the stream where she had first encountered Red Bear. There, beside the flowing water, she finally allowed herself to truly consider what she had just learned. She wasn't just an outsider learning to fit in. She was coming home to a family she had never known existed. Charlotte sat by the stream until the sun began to set. her mind reeling with questions that had no easy answers. Gray Eagle had followed her but respected her need for solitude, settling on a fallen log several yards away. His presence was steady, patient, like an anchor in the storm of her thoughts. "Tell me about her," Charlotte finally said, her voice hoarse from unshed tears. "About Ayanna." Gray Eagle moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "I was young when she disappeared, but I remember her laughter. It was like water over stones, bright, musical. She was beloved by everyone, especially her father." "What happened to her? How did she end up with William Harrison?" "There was a raid," Gray Eagle said carefully. "White settlers attacked our winter camp 26 years ago. Many died. Many more were taken. Ayanna was 17, old enough to be seen as valuable." His jaw tightened. "The raiders sold captives to farms and households far from here, where they could never find their way home." Charlotte's stomach churned as the implications settled over her. Her mother hadn't been a delicate white woman who died tragically in childbirth. She had been a kidnapped native woman, sold into what amounted to slavery, forced to bear the child of her captor. "He raped her," Charlotte whispered, the words falling like stones into still water. "We do not know what happened in that house," Gray Eagle said gently. "But Ayanna was strong, like her father. Whatever she endured, she survived long enough to give you life. That took courage." Charlotte touched the pendant again, trying to imagine the woman who had worn it. Had she sung the sacred songs to her unborn child? Had she whispered stories of her people, planting seeds of connection that would bloom decades later? Why didn't she escape? Why didn't she come home? Perhaps she tried. Perhaps she was watched too closely. Or perhaps, Gray Eagle hesitated, perhaps she knew that by the time she could escape, she would be carrying you, and the journey would be too dangerous. The thought that her mother might have stayed in captivity to protect her brought fresh tears to Charlotte's eyes. All these years, she had imagined herself as the cause of her mother's death. Now she learned she might have been the reason her mother lived as long as she did. Iron Wolf searched for her until the day he died. Gray Eagle continued. Every trader who came through, every traveler, he asked about a young woman with dark hair and eyes like storm clouds. He never stopped believing she was alive somewhere. "And now I'm here," Charlotte said, the weight of it overwhelming. "After all these years, I've come home. Yes. But the question is, what will you do with this knowledge?" Before Charlotte could answer, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. Grandmother Willow emerged from the forest path, carrying a bundle wrapped in soft leather. Her face was streaked with tears, but her expression was one of joy mixed with profound sorrow. "I have brought you something," the elder said, settling beside Charlotte on the ground. "Something that belonged to your grandfather." She unwrapped the bundle carefully, revealing a beaded hair ornament of exquisite beauty. The tiny glass beads formed the pattern of a soaring eagle. Its wings spread wide in flight. At the center was a piece of turquoise, the exact shade of Charlotte's eyes. "Iron Wolf made this for Ayanna when she reached womanhood," Grandmother Willow explained. "He said his daughter's spirit was like an eagle, strong, free, able to see far distances. When she disappeared, he kept this, hoping someday to place it in her hair again." Charlotte's hands shook as she accepted the ornament. The beadwork was incredibly fine, each tiny element placed with love and precision. She could almost feel her grandfather's hands working by firelight, creating something beautiful for a daughter he would never see again. "There is more, Grandmother," Willow said, her voice thick with emotion. "Tomorrow, the council will meet. They must decide whether to acknowledge you officially as Iron Wolf's granddaughter, as Ayanna's child. What does that mean?" "It means you would have a place here, not as Gray Eagle's woman, not as an outsider seeking refuge, but as one of us, blood of our blood, with all the rights and responsibilities that brings." Gray Eagle shifted beside her. "It also means Red Bear and others who question your presence would have to accept you as family, not merely tolerate you as a guest." Charlotte looked down at the eagle ornament in her hands, its beaded wings catching the last light of sunset. For 19 years, she had felt like a stranger in her own life, never quite fitting anywhere. Now she was being offered something she had never dared dream of: true belonging. What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm lying about the song, about the pendant? Grandmother Willow smiled through her tears. Child, you could no more lie about being Ayana's daughter than the river could lie about flowing to the sea. It is written in your face, in your voice, in the way you move through the world. Tomorrow, the council will simply confirm what our hearts already know. As darkness settled over the forest, Charlotte felt something shifting inside her chest, not the familiar weight of anxiety and inadequacy, but something lighter, warmer. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. The council fire burned bright against the star-filled sky, its flames casting dancing shadows across the faces of the village elders. Charlotte sat between Gray Eagle and Grandmother Willow, her grandfather's beaded ornament resting in her lap like a talisman. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for the deliberation to begin. Chief Standing Eagle, a man whose weathered face spoke of decades of wise leadership, stood to address the gathered circle. His voice carried the weight of authority as he spoke in their native tongue, but his eyes remained kind when they rested on Charlotte. He explains why we are here. Gray Eagle translated quietly. He tells the story of Iron Wolf's lost daughter and asks the council to examine the evidence of your heritage. One by one, the elders spoke. Grandmother Willow rose first, her voice strong despite her age as she recounted the moment Charlotte had sung the sacred song. She held up the silver pendant, turning it so the firelight caught its surface, explaining its significance to those who might not remember. An elder Charlotte didn't recognize stood next, his expression skeptical. Red Bear sat beside him, his arms crossed, watching the proceedings with obvious doubt. The elder spoke at length, gesturing toward Charlotte with what seemed like concern rather than hostility. He worries about accepting someone raised in the white world, Gray Eagle explained. He fears you may not understand our ways, our responsibilities to each other and the earth. Charlotte felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, another voice joined the discussion. Morningstar, the young woman who had first heard Charlotte sing, stood and spoke passionately, her words tumbling over each other in their urgency. She defends you, Gray Eagle said, surprise coloring his voice. She says blood calls to blood, that you couldn't know the sacred song unless it lived in your bones. The debate continued for what felt like hours. Charlotte watched the faces around the fire, trying to read expressions and tones even when she couldn't understand the words. Some elders nodded thoughtfully when others spoke in her favor, while a few remained visibly unconvinced. Finally, Chief Standing Eagle raised his hand for silence. He looked directly at Charlotte, his dark eyes serious but not unkind. Charlotte Harrison, he said in careful English, to stand. On unsteady legs, Charlotte rose. The circle of faces watched her with varying degrees of curiosity, acceptance, and doubt. You claim to be Ayana's daughter, Iron Wolf's granddaughter. Before we decide, you must answer, if we accept you as our blood, will you accept us as yours? Will you honor our ways, protect our people, share in both our joys and our burdens? The weight of the question settled over Charlotte like a blanket. These people were offering her something William Harrison never had: unconditional belonging. But they were also asking for something in return: commitment, responsibility, the willingness to be part of something larger than herself. I will, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. I want to learn your ways, to contribute to this community. I want to honor the memory of the grandfather I never knew and the mother whose sacrifice gave me. Life's Chief Standing Eagle nodded slowly. He turned to Red Bear, who had been silent through most of the discussion. Red Bear, you have questioned this woman's place among us. What say you now? Red Bear stood, his imposing figure cutting a stark silhouette against the fire. For a long moment, he studied Charlotte's face, When he finally spoke, his words were measured, deliberate. Gray Eagle's translation came softly. He says he sees Iron Wolf's stubborn courage in your eyes, and he asks forgiveness for his doubt. The chief raised both hands toward the sky, speaking words that needed no translation. The decision was clear in his tone, and the way the gathered elders relaxed. And Grandmother Willow's tears of joy. "Welcome home, granddaughter of Iron Wolf," Chief Standing Eagle said in English. "From this day forward, you shall be known as Tashina, she who shines light on the rock. You are one of us." As the council members began to disperse, Gray Eagle turned to Charlotte with something she had never seen in his eyes before, not just respect or kindness, but admiration. "How does it feel," he asked quietly, "to finally know who you are?" Charlotte touched the pendant at her throat, then looked up at the stars wheeling overhead. Like coming alive, she whispered. The name Tashina settled into Charlotte's soul, like water finding its proper channel. In the weeks following the council's decision, she discovered that having a true place in the world changed everything: the way she walked, the way she spoke, even the way she breathed. The constant anxiety that had lived in her chest for 19 years began to dissolve, replaced by something she had never experienced: peace. Her body, too, began to heal. The meals that had once felt like battles became sources of strength. Grandmother Willow's teas and broths nourished not just her flesh but something deeper. She grew stronger, her pale skin taking on color from hours spent outdoors, her thin frame filling out as her body learned to trust again. It was during one crisp autumn morning, as she helped prepare the village for winter, that Gray Eagle approached her with an unusual request. "Come with me," he said, his eyes holding a mixture of anticipation and something that might have been nervousness. "There is something I must show you." He led her to a hill overlooking the village, where a small structure was taking shape. Charlotte could see that it was nearly finished, a home built in the traditional style, but larger than most, with windows facing both the sunrise and the mountains. "I have been building this," Gray Eagle said quietly, "for us, if you are willing." Charlotte's breath caught. The implications of his words hung in the air between them like morning mist. "Gray Eagle, and I know the arrangement your father made was not your choice," he interrupted gently. "But what has grown between us, that is real, that is chosen." She looked at the house, then at the man who had shown her nothing but patience and respect from the moment they met. Somewhere along their journey together, her fear of him had transformed into something else entirely: trust, affection, and now, perhaps, love. "When my father sold me to you," she said slowly, "I thought it was the end of my life. But it was actually the beginning." Gray Eagle stepped closer, close enough that she could see the hope in his dark eyes. "Then you will stay, you will be my wife, not because of any arrangement, but because you choose it." Charlotte thought of the frightened girl who had left Cedar Springs, so convinced of her own worthlessness that she could barely speak above a whisper. That girl was gone, replaced by Tashina, a woman who knew her worth, who understood her place in the world. "Yes," she said, the word coming out like a song. "I choose you. I choose this life. I choose myself." The wedding ceremony took place as the first snow began to fall, the entire village gathering to witness the union. Charlotte wore traditional dress that Grandmother Willow and the other women had spent weeks creating, soft deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork, and her grandfather's eagle ornament shining in her hair. But it wasn't the beautiful dress or the elaborate ceremony that made the day special. It was the moment when Gray Eagle took her hands and spoke his vows in both languages, ensuring she understood every word of his commitment to her. "I promise to see you as you truly are," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Not as damaged goods or a burden to be carried, but as Tashina, she who brings light to dark places, who shows others that healing is possible." When the ceremony ended and the celebration began, Charlotte found herself surrounded by people who knew her story and celebrated her strength rather than pitying her struggle. Children who had once stared at her with curiosity now climbed into her lap, begging for stories. Women who had been cautious now included her in their daily conversations. And Work. Red Bear approached her as the evening wound down, his expression serious but no longer hostile. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "I judged you by your weaknesses rather than your courage. That was wrong." "You were protecting your people," Charlotte Tashina replied. "I understand that now, but I hope you can see that I am your people too." Red Bear nodded slowly. "Yes, I see that now." As the celebration continued around them, Gray Eagle pulled Tashina aside, leading her to a quiet spot where they could watch the stars emerge overhead. "Do you ever regret leaving your old life?" he asked. Tashina considered the question seriously. She thought of Eleanor and Beatrice, whom she missed terribly, and even of the familiar routines of Cedar Springs. But then she thought of who she had been in that place, a ghost haunting the edges of other people's lives. "I regret the pain it caused my sisters," she said finally. "But I don't regret becoming who I was meant to be." Gray Eagle smiled, pulling her closer to his warmth. "And who are you meant to be?" "Tashina," she said without hesitation. "Wife, healer, storyteller, daughter of two worlds, granddaughter of Iron Wolf. Woman who learned that real love sees past the scars to the soul beneath, above them." The stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to a love born of respect, nurtured by patience, and sealed by choice. Spring returned to the mountains with a promise of renewal that Tashina felt in her very bones. She stood at the edge of the village, watching the familiar path that led to Cedar Springs. Today, after nearly a year of silence, a messenger would arrive with news from her former life. Gray Eagle approached quietly, as was his way, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are ready for whatever news he brings." Tashina nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat belly where new life was beginning to grow. The pregnancy had been Grandmother Willow's diagnosis just days before, confirmed by the elder's knowing smile and gentle herbs to ease the morning sickness. I am not the same person who left the place," she said softly. "Whatever has happened there cannot touch who I have become." The messenger, a young trader named Samuel whom she vaguely remembered from Cedar Springs, arrived dusty and tired. His eyes widened when he saw her, no longer the frail, pale girl he had known, but a woman radiant with health and purpose. "Miss Charlotte," he began, then stopped, clearly struggling with what to call her. "Tashina," she said kindly. "My name is Tashina now." Samuel nodded uncertainly and reached into his pack. "I have letters from your sisters and other news." Eleanor's letter was thick with tears and joy, filled with relief at learning Tashina was well and happy. Beatrice's was shorter, but no less loving, including pressed flowers from their mothers. Garden both begged for details about her new life and promised to find a way to visit. Social conventions be damned. But it was Samuel's spoken news that carried the greatest weight. "Your father, Mr. Harrison, he's been asking questions about your mother, where she really came from." Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "After you left, he found some old papers, letters. I think he's starting to understand what really happened." Tashina felt Gray Eagle tense beside her, but she remained calm. "And he wants to see you, too, to make amends. I think he's not the same man since you left. Something broke in him when he realized what he'd done that evening." Tashina sat with Grandmother Willow in the elder's garden, sharing the news while they tended the medicinal plants that had become Tashina's specialty. "Will you see him?" the old woman asked, her weathered hands gentle with a young seedling. "I don't know. Part of me wants to show him who I've become, to prove that his cruelty didn't destroy me. But another part," Tashina paused, touching her belly where her child grew. "Another part knows I don't need his approval anymore. Forgiveness is not for him," Grandmother Willow said wisely. "It is for you, to release the last chains that bind you to that pain." 2 months later, William Harrison arrived at the village borders. He came alone, on foot, with the bearing of a man who had been humbled by his own discoveries. Tashina met him at the forest edge, Gray Eagle and several warriors nearby but not interfering. The man before her seemed smaller than her memories, his face marked by grief and recognition of his failures. When he saw her, truly saw her, his composure cracked. "You look like her," he whispered, "like your mother." "I was so blind." "Yes," Tashina said simply. "You were? I came to ask your forgiveness and to tell you. I know the truth now. About Ayana. About what I did." His voice broke. "I stole her from her family, and then I stole you from yours." Tashina studied the broken man before her, feeling pity rather than anger. You cannot undo the past, but you can honor her memory by treating others with the dignity you denied her. William nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Your sisters. They want to know you're safe, happy. Tell them I am both. Tell them I am finally home." As her father turned to leave, Tashina called after him, "The child I carry will know both sides of their heritage. They will know their grandmother was a brave woman who loved fiercely, not the weak creature you made her pretend to be." That winter, as snow blanketed the mountains and her daughter grew strong in her womb, Tashina often stood at her window watching the sun rise over peaks that no longer seemed like barriers. They were guardians now, protecting the life she had built from the ashes of who she used to be. Gray Eagle would find her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind, their child moving between them like a promise of the future. "She will be strong," he would murmur against her hair. "Like her mother, she will know she belongs." Tashina would reply, "That is the greatest gift we can give her." And in the growing light of each new day, Tashina understood that her name had become prophecy fulfilled. She had indeed brought light to the dark rock of her own despair, illuminating a path home to herself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next story.